Welcome to the world of the invisible thief. Most people think that prices go up because companies are greedy or because things are getting harder to make. And sometimes that's true. But the real story is much deeper. It's not that the Lego set is getting more expensive. It's that your money is getting smaller. Imagine the entire world is one giant pizza. If there are 100 slices of pizza and $100 in the world, each slice costs $1. Simple, right? But what happens if someone magically prints another $100, but we don't bake any more pizza? Now we have $200 chasing the same 100 slices. Suddenly, each slice costs $2. The pizza didn't change, the hunger didn't change, only the number of pepperonis changed. Today, we're going on a journey through time. We'll see how a mountain of silver destroyed an empire, how a printing press fueled a world war, and why your $10 bill today is fighting a losing battle against the clock. Our first stop is ancient Rome. For centuries, the Roman denarius was the gold standard, the silver standard of the world. It was 95% pure silver. It was trusted from London to Egypt. But then came the emperors who wanted more than they could afford. Emperor Nero had a problem. He wanted to build giant palaces and pay for massive armies, but the silver mines were running dry. So he did something sneaky. He debased the currency. He melted down the pure silver coins and mixed them with copper. To the average person, the coin looked the same, but it was a lie. By the year 270 AD, the denarius was basically a copper coin with a thin silver wash that rubbed off in your pocket. The result? Prices skyrocketed. A bushel of wheat that cost 0.5 denarii in the Golden Age now cost 200 denarii. The Roman government tried to fix it by passing the Edict on Maximum Prices, basically telling people you aren't allowed to charge more than this. But you can't arrest your way out of inflation. Bakers stopped baking, farmers stopped farming, the economy collapsed into a system of barter, trading a cow for a bag of grain because no one trusted the fake money anymore. Rome didn't just fall to barbarians, it fell to its own shrinking coins. You might think, okay, so the problem is not enough silver, but history has a funny way of repeating itself. In the 1500s, Spain conquered the New World and found a literal mountain of silver in Potosí. They brought so much silver back to Europe that they thought they would be the richest nation forever. This was the price revolution. Because there was suddenly so much silver, the silver itself became less valuable. It's the same pizza metaphor. Spain had more pepperonis, silver, but they weren't producing more pizza, food, and clothes. In fact, because they were so rich, they stopped making things and just bought everything from other countries. When the silver eventually ran out, Spain was left with high prices and no industries. They were rich on paper, but poor in reality. While Europe was obsessed with metal, China was inventing the future. During the Song dynasty, trade was booming, but there was a problem. Iron coins were heavy. If you wanted to buy a silk robe, you needed a donkey just to carry the money. The government came up with a brilliant idea, jiaozi. It was the world's first paper money. At first, it was great. You could trade the paper for iron or silk at any time. It was backed by something real. But then came the wars. The Song dynasty was under attack by the Mongols. They needed money now. So they did what every government in history eventually does. They printed more paper than they had iron to back it up. By the time the Mongols took over, the paper money was worthless. The Yuan dynasty tried to fix it by making new paper money, but they fell into the same trap. They printed so much that people started using silk and grain as money again. This was the first time humanity learned a painful lesson. Paper is only valuable if people believe it's scarce. For a long time, the world tried to prevent this by using the gold standard. Every dollar or pound was like a receipt for a piece of gold sitting in a vault. This kept governments honest. They couldn't print money unless they found more gold. It was a golden age of price stability. But then, the world went to war. War is the ultimate engine of inflation. In 1914, European nations realized they couldn't fight a world war and keep the gold standard. They needed to spend money they didn't have, so they suspended the gold link and started the presses. We've all heard of the Weimar Republic. This was the final boss of inflation. Because Germany had to pay massive reparations, they printed marks until the numbers became meaningless. Children used stacks of cash as building blocks. A stamp cost more than a house used to cost. But the most important moment in modern inflation history happened in a quiet place called Bretton Woods in 1944. The world decided that the US dollar would be the world reserve currency, and the dollar would be backed by gold at $35 an ounce. But by 1971, the US was in trouble. The Vietnam War and new social programs were costing a fortune. Other countries, like France, started to suspect the US was printing too many dollars. They showed up at the gold window and said, "Give us our gold." On August 15, 1971, Nixon temporarily suspended the link between the dollar and gold. That temporary move has lasted over 50 years. This was the birth of the modern world of fiat money, money that is valuable only because the government says it is. Without the gold anchor, the 1970s became a decade of chaos. Prices for gas and groceries doubled and tripled. Economists were baffled. They thought you could only have high inflation or high unemployment, not both. They called it stagflation. It felt like the end of the American dream. To save the dollar, the U.S. needed a sheriff. Paul Volcker, the head of the Federal Reserve, decided to do the unthinkable. To stop people from spending and driving up prices, he raised interest rates to a staggering 20%. It was brutal. Farmers protested, businesses went bankrupt, and the country fell into a deep recession. But it worked. By making money expensive to borrow, he sucked the excess cash out of the system. Inflation finally dropped. Volcker became a hero to some and a villain to others, but he set the stage for 40 years of relative stability. But then came 2020. The world faced a crisis like no other. To prevent a total collapse, governments around the world did something unprecedented. They printed trillions of dollars in months. In fact, nearly 40% of all US dollars in existence were created after 2020. For a while, experts said, "Don't worry, inflation is transitory." But then the pizza metaphor returned. We had millions of people with stimulus pepperonis in their pockets, but the pizza factories in China, shipping ports, were closed. Too much money, too few goods. This is the hidden tax. Inflation is the only tax that doesn't require a vote in Congress. It quietly transfers wealth from people who save money to people who owe money. If you have $10,000 in the bank and inflation is 10%, you didn't lose any dollars, you still have $10,000. But those dollars now only buy what $9,000 used to buy. The thief visited you in the middle of the night and took 10% of your life's work. So what is the lesson of 2,000 years of inflation? It's that money is not just paper or metal. Money is a battery for your time. You spend 8 hours a day working to charge that battery. Inflation is a leak in that battery. History shows us that every time a government finds a way to create money out of thin air, they eventually use it until the money breaks. From the silver-washed copper of Rome to the digital trillions of today, the story is always the same. We live in a world where 2% inflation is considered the goal. But remember, even at 2%, your money loses half its value every 35 years. Inflation isn't an accident, it's a feature of the system we live in. So how are you protecting your time battery? Are you seeing the invisible thief in your own life? Let us know in the comments how prices have changed in your city over the last few years. And if you want to understand more about the hidden forces that run our world, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Because in the world of finance, the most expensive thing you can own is a lack of knowledge.